finding ways to fund education in New Jersey. I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Newsmakers. With me this hour is New Jersey State Senator Jim Whelan. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about the overall budget and where education fits into that state budget. How much of a role does education funding play in the state budget?
Well, it's a huge piece of the state budget, and it's a huge piece for local school districts as well. Support they get from the state. Most of the school districts couldn't even function without it anywhere close to the level that they're at now. The uncertainty that we have right now is due to the fact that there was a lawsuit brought last year, on last year's budget, when there were severe cuts to education, and said that we're not fully funding, the state is not doing its share and fully funding its commitment to education. The Supreme Court appointed a special master, and the special master essentially, in layman's terms, came in and said, the state is not fully funding, but on the other hand, the state doesn't have the money to fully fund. So kind of leaves us who knows where. As of this taping, we're waiting to hear from the Supreme Court in terms of their final judgment. They could do one of three things. They could side with the special master, and as a result of that, say you have to fully fund and go back to the funding level that we had 2 years ago. They could say, well, we don't agree with the special master and the state is okay. Or there's a third possibility where they would say, well, we hear what the special master is saying, but we also recognize the reality the state doesn't have the money, so we're going to give the state 3 years or 5 years to ramp up and create the funding that is necessary to do the fully funding. Hopefully we'll get that answer prior to the final adoption of the budget. In any case, I think we have to anticipate that looking at additional ways to bring some money to the education system. The governor has indicated he's not interested in, that any money that goes to education is going to have to come out of other programs.
So then where do you start then, as you move through this budget process, trying to anticipate a state Supreme Court decision in this process?
I think first off, you try to get the decision from the Supreme Court in a timely fashion, so you know what we're talking about, 300 million, 600 million, what exactly is the dollar figure. From my perspective, and I think most of the Democrats would say, well, let's go back and revisit the millionaire's tax, which is a tax on income above $1 million. So if the first million is at the old rate, which is a little less than 9%, if you make more than $1 million, that above $1 million is 10+ %. That would restore about 600 million, and that may give you some of the cushion to absorb all or most of whatever the Supreme Court would hand down. There's a lot of concern, as the governor has indicated, that if this were to happen, he's going to look at perhaps charity care for hospitals, or he's going to look at homestead rebates for seniors and other vital programs in the rest of the state. When again, I think that we really ought to look at perhaps the millionaire's tax as a way to solve this dilemma.
So if this is phased in over time, if that is the option that the Supreme Court decides, are there other options in terms of funding for the state to potentially address? If funding comes in incrementally, are there ways in which we can fund education at these increased levels?
It really would depend on what the increments are. If the increments are relatively small, then it becomes obviously an easier lift. But assuming that they're significant, which is, I think anything above 100 million, frankly, starts to become real money. Then I think you really have to look at, all right, where can you get that money from existing programs, which are already tight, and again, the option that I think we really need to look at first would be the millionaire's tax. I don't think you can go back and ask the local school districts to put that burden back on their property taxpayers. That would, they're already overtaxed. So I think that, and I think we've already made the cuts in the districts. The good news is that this year's funding is level with last year's. The bad news is that last year's funding represented severe cuts from the year before.
Come back, give us an update. Let us know how this is progressing.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've been talking with New Jersey State Senator Jim Whelan. I'm Jill Horner.